All right, everyone. This is Matthias Einig from Rencore, and I welcome you to the webinar together with Jeremy Thake from Hyperfish about more data, more problems, how to get complete employee profiles and how to secure them. I'm Matthias Einig, CEO and MVP, CEO of Rencore. I've been doing SharePoint for quite some while, about 12 years or so. And with me is Jeremy Thake. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, Matthias. So Jeremy Thake, I'm VP of Product Technology here at Hyperfish. I've been working with SharePoint since about 2004 for all of my sins. I work at Hyperfish now, working really centered around profiles in Office 365.
Cool. Thank you, Jeremy. So you see we're already in a festive mood. I put myself into the ugliest sweater that I found.
This is not an ugly sweater. This is actually me dressed up normally. So don't even try and claim this is ugly.
I was about to ask, but well, okay. I ignore that. Can you please move on to the next slide? So just for everyone attending, I think a couple of people are still joining in, but for everyone attending, if you have any questions throughout the presentation that both of us are doing, then please use the Q&A function in Zoom. So there's a button somewhere which says Q&A. There you can type in your question. It will be collected and we'll answer them later on in the Q&A section at the end of this webinar. Also, if there are some common questions like, is this webinar going to be recorded? Yes, it will be. And we will answer those right away by text also during the webinar.
We should do like a drinking game of how many times people ask whether the webinar is recorded or not.
Yeah, it's recorded, but we will not share it. Now, of course, we will share that webinar with everyone who signed up for it. And so don't worry about that if you join in late or want to share it with some colleagues. Okay, Jeremy, go ahead. Get started.
Sure. So the reason we wanted to do this webinar was to kind of, I guess, align the two audiences we have. I mean, as a Hyperfish evangelist, we do a lot of work with the business talking about profiles. With Matthias's company, they do a lot of work around talking to developers, which I'm guessing is the majority of this audience today. And what I wanted to really kind of raise was this notion that I'm from the developer world. I worked at Microsoft, actually in Office 365 development messaging for 3 years. And part of that was really kind of encouraging developers to take advantage of things like profiles inside of the Microsoft Graph to make your business applications better. So this webinar is really to try and highlight the importance of profiles and why it matters both to developers, IT pros, and kind of to that information worker audience so that you understand that, but also just to show some of the technologies and products in the ecosystem that can actually help to make this better for you as a developer, but also you as an IT pro and actually as an end user working within Office 365 as well. And so what we kind of talk about when we talk to our customer base is really this notion of where we've moved to this kind of people-centric world. So rather than kind of more traditional kind of experiences that we're used to where you go into one product for mail and calendar and then you go into another one to jump into a website to access other services that are pulling data from kind of disparate systems. What we're finding now is that you as an individual is kind of really the center of all those different experiences. So whether I'm in SharePoint or Microsoft Teams or Outlook, Skype for Business or Delve, and a variety of other services that exist inside Office 365, what we actually find is that you as a person is kind of really driving the way that things are displayed to you, how it's driven when I go look up other people in your organization and how they are displayed to that other individual. And also some of the decisions that are made in products based on who you are inside the company, whether it's security and authorizations and permissions, or whether it's actually things like what content you see because of the role you're on in the organization. And what you notice now in Office 365 is that they're doing a better job. It's not great, but they're definitely doing a better job of servicing people information across all the different products that are in Office 365, whether it be Delve, where they're showing things like your photo and your job title and things like your office location and skills and education, to things like inside Microsoft Teams now, if I click on a contact card for someone who I'm chatting with, I have the ability, for instance, to jump in and have a look at their organizational chart to see who their manager is and who their peers are and who reports to them. And then same thing in Delve with those org charts. But also something that you'd be familiar with for a long, long time is these Outlook contact cards, whether I'm in Windows or Mac. I get to see their phone numbers and what their work address is and who their manager is directly in those interfaces. And so it's really important that you take this into consideration when you're developing business systems internally for your organization, that you take advantage of this profile information, because information workers are used to having those kind of things wherever they see a user shown in the interface. So if you're doing a business application that is listing kind of approvals that are going on, I should be able to hover over those names and the approvers and see more information about who that approver is. And it's stuff that is very easy to do now with things like the Office Fabric UI and the Microsoft Graph APIs and how you authorize in. And so that's just really important from that aspect. Now, what we know from our own research is we provide a free analysis tool that you can go get at hyperfish.com by signing up for Hyperfish Lite. And what we provide is a dashboard to show you how populated your profile information is within Azure Active Directory if you're Office 365, or Active Directory if you're on premises. And one of the big things we've noticed is, unfortunately, that out of all the employees that we've now analyzed, which is kind of getting very close to 5 million users now, that over 80% of those 5 million are missing core information, whether it's job title, manager or department, and profile photo. And profile photo we find is nearly the most missing attribute inside of a profile. And as a kind of a technical developer type person, I'm like, well, why is that a problem? Because it's quite easy. I just go on the top right, click on my name, and go to my account, and I upload it. And I can provide not just my photo there, but other information as well. But we know from this data that this is a problem. And so although we live in this kind of dream world of being able to show all this profile information in all these different services, unfortunately we know for a fact that in most environments that information is missing. And really, the only places I've seen it work is inside Microsoft, where they have like a 30-person team managing this across their 120,000 plus users, and Contoso, which is the demo environment they use to demo all their stuff in all the keynotes. And so just as another example here of why this is important, and these are stories we hear from our customers as we talk to them when they reach out to talk to us about our own product, is we had a CEO of a global oil company, and they had to make a very quick business decision around some emergency that was happening in another territory. And the CEO wanted to reach out to the director in that other region. Now, unfortunately, when the CEO went into their employee phone book, which was driven from Active Directory, the information wasn't there for that person's phone number. They weren't on Skype for Business. They were actually offline. And they weren't they weren't reading them, responding to emails. So the CEO had to escalate this to try and get a call. It took the CEO nearly 8 hours to get that person's phone number, basically, essentially by word of mouth, reaching out to different people who he thought might actually have that cell number. And this meant that it delayed the decision they had to make in that crisis situation. And so the intent of kind of like having that profile information up to date in there is so that these decisions can happen in seconds rather than in hours. Another one, which is a sad story really, was that there was an employee that was having a heart condition, and 911 was called, and they appeared at the front of the building in reception and asked where this particular employee was, and the receptionist jumped into the directory and looked up the location of the person. And unfortunately, the location was incorrect for the floor number and the cubicle number for that employee. And so it was really important for them to have that office location data up to date, because you want to be able to find those people, not just for emergency situations like this particular scenario, where it actually delayed the ER team from getting to that person in a quick response time, but also just from a meeting perspective. If I've got a meeting scheduled on my calendar and I need to go and approach this particular person, I just want to be able to look them up on my phone, in my corporate directory, and just go straight to that person's location. And then just another example, which we see is more common as companies start to be acquired over time, as these bigger conglomerates come around, was that there was a leader in a biotech here in North America, where over the last 5 years, they've been adding over 35 different businesses, which equated to 20,000 employees. And what this meant is that each of these companies had different Active Directory domains. And it meant that when we wanted to look up employees, the consistency of the data across them was very, very bad, whether it was the formatting of phone numbers or the formatting of office locations, or maybe the consistency of job titles across all those different companies. Now, as a developer, when you're trying to use this data to make decisions, we found with this particular customer that they were trying to make decisions about membership to security groups, and membership to business decisions on whether they get content shown to them or not. And the highlight there is that by having a more consistent approach to profiles, they were able to more automate things such as those business workflows to present things just to people in the marketing department, or to only have this available option in the UI if they had directory in their job title. And so having clean profiles can really help to make some of these business decisions that you make as you're trying to build this software inside of your environment. Now, just as a few examples of this that Microsoft suffer from with their own products based on this, is that obviously, as a no-brainer here, if your profile information is missing inside of Azure Active Directory, your contact cards are going to be empty. But imagine then that you go to look at the organizational chart. Well, if my manager attribute isn't there, there's no way it can build an org chart because it doesn't know the hierarchy of people in your organization. Or that the popular documents from people that are peers of you and your managers and reporting chain won't show up in popular documents because that's all dependent on the organizational chart there as well. And then think of this one. With a manager approval, if there's no manager attribute inside of Active Directory, essentially it means that the approvals aren't going to work when it goes to, if I submit my expense request and it has to go to my manager for approval, it won't know who my manager is, and so that workflow is just going to sit there in error. And likewise, as the simple thing in Skype for Business, if the format of my phone number isn't validated, which if you use Delve or if you try and update this through standard Exchange profile editing, it's not going to validate that. And so that when I have a number like EXT1919, the EXT is going to go to 398 there, and that number will be incorrect. And then the other big thing that we see is that often this data is actually different in different systems within the organization. And so there's a lot of problems here with having this profile information in a way that is correct and complete and up to date, which really affects the way that you work in your organization. So Matthias, how have you seen this impact kind of your audience from the perspective of developers that are trying to build business solutions inside of Office 365?
Yeah, so let me just give a quick overview what actually is a customization, or why do organizations actually customize, and then I'll get into how does that affect the user profile information that is, maybe not complete or completed with your solution. We'll see that in a moment, but one moment, I'm just sharing my screen. So you should be able to see my screen now.
Yeah, we can see that.
All right. So first of all, so Gartner is saying that 9 out of 10 SharePoint environments are customized, which is quite a lot. Basically, almost every SharePoint environment customized, and we hear that a lot in at events when we talk to people and we exhibit there and tell them, okay, we have solutions that help you with the customizations. The people often tell us, no, we use SharePoint or Office 365 totally out of the box, and we only use out of the box features because they are not aware what actually a customization is and what those customizations do. So to give you a little bit of an overview or a feeling what this means is, so if you use SharePoint, then you will have maybe the standard functionality to store documents, to store user profile information, and so on. But on top of that, often there are business applications that are built, like expense reporting or like approval processes. There are business processes that are implemented in that access all the data that is stored in Office 365. There are project sites that store data that have maybe custom content types, custom lists, forms, maybe use Power Apps to gather data and store it in lists or connect it to other data storage in your intranet. You have workflows that enable your business to do their job and to document everything. And then you have, of course, portals like intranet portals and dashboards that all combines that. And those customizations are done by many, many different people in the organization, and does not necessarily have to be developers. So we have, of course, maybe in-house developers who install business applications, maybe it's some that they build or some that they have bought. We have business users who customize existing components of SharePoint to their needs. We have external developers like normal solution integrators that are hired by an organization. Jeremy, we can see you still, right? Don't pick your nose. We have things that are customizations that are maybe added from the App Store and installed, consultants that upload stuff. We have external scripts that are integrated on pages, maybe with content editor web parts and things like that, that access data or change the configuration. We have external services that are accessing data from SharePoint and send out emails maybe to external users, and also give permissions to all of that. So all of this are customizations, and they can be done maybe on-prem with farm solutions or sandbox solutions, but can be also done with SharePoint Framework or add-ins or SharePoint Designer, or even by just uploading a piece of script that somebody found on the internet to a site and executing it just by having added page permissions. So just to give a brief overview, so this is all great. Everybody customizes SharePoint, and it really is one of the key success factors of SharePoint in an organization, that you can customize it to your needs. But those customizations can cause, of course, a lot of problems as well. So unexperienced business users upload scripts that they have no clue what they do. Users install add-ins without reviewing them, maybe from a dodgy supplier, dodgy vendor from Russia who is uploading a script and maybe changing it afterwards with documents stored on or a script stored on a CDN. Or they just blindly trust the developers, the SIs, who are maybe not as experienced as the consultancy is telling you they should be. The scripts are maybe exploited. Third-party components are used because no developer wants to reinvent the wheel entirely. So they use existing frameworks that are stored maybe somewhere where you don't know. So the actual service might get hacked. So these are all different areas where your data that is maybe accessed by those customizations can be at risk. And I'll just give you a short example how that actually could look like for profile information. So I have a short video, and I hope that the audio works because I pre-recorded the audio. So this is an Office 365 SharePoint site, and customized as an intranet page. So I'll just start the audio, and Jeremy, please say something if the audio is not working.
The marketing department of Contoso recently updated their intranet portal. To make it easier for their employees to stay on top of the latest news and announcements, they added a jQuery carousel widget that they found on the internet. What they don't know is that this widget leads user profile information. When Patty, Contoso's CEO, visits the portal, the script downloads her user profile and sends it to an API that looks just like jQuery. All this without Patty knowing about it. In the background, all of Patty's profile information is sent to Ben via email, who has built the script and put it on the internet. Ben has now access to all of Patty's contact information, email addresses of her reports, the office location, past projects, skills, but also her schools, her birthday or interests. The same API can also be used to access the entire company directory, and you can imagine how this could be misused for marketing or sales, but also for social engineering to get access to other systems within the company.
All right, so this was just a brief example how this could actually look like if somebody intentionally or unintentionally introduces such code into your environment, how it can access the data and exploit that data. It's not really that hard or complicated to build those things. So there's also nothing that you can actually do about it. And also Microsoft cannot do anything about it because Microsoft has no control over those customizations that are built. The customizations are just basically JavaScript executed in the security context of the user who's opening that page. And therefore, the JavaScript has access to all the APIs, acting as that user, accessing your emails, accessing SharePoint, accessing the profile information, and so on. So before we come to the solution, now that we know the problem, I'll hand over to Jeremy and to talk about the solution for his problem, the user profiles, how to keep them up to date.
Yeah, thanks, Matthias. I think the big thing that we've learned, and it was something that I was aware of when I was in the Microsoft team anyway, was this notion that if someone does add an app into SharePoint from the store, or they download something from GitHub or from PnP, once you've deployed that into that environment, they have access to core user information, much like if I'm on my phone and I download an app from the store on iTunes or Android and kind of give it access to my microphone, or give it access to give me notifications, it kind of activates the ability for those apps to dig in and grab more information. So the scenario used there of kind of having access to that data is kind of just something to be mindful of as both an IT pro, an information worker, or a developer, that you need to be aware of those things. And as a developer, I think it's a responsibility, like we do at Hyperfish, to declare very granularly what access you actually need. So if you go and sign up for hyperfish.com now and try Hyperfish Lite, that when you sign into our product, we'll actually ask you for consent to read access to your profiles. Then once you configure the product and you want to start actually using the product in the way that we intend, at that point, then we ask you for consent to write back to user profiles. And so that's just kind of a good kind of citizen developer thing to do, is like, don't ask for everything up front. Gradually ask for the access you require, so you get the trust of the IT pro or the information worker to know exactly what your product's doing and why you need those types of permissions. And so with our product, essentially we saw lots of ways that organizations were trying to keep profile information up to date. The most common one we saw was this notion of the CEO or the comms manager or maybe the HR director sending out an email blast to the entire company, like employees all, this time this year, like, it's time to update your profiles. And obviously most people will ignore that email because it isn't directed at them. A lot of people will use the help desk to update those things. And unfortunately for IT pros who are on the call, what tends to happen is that it kind of lays on their responsibility to manage this themselves and get kind of bulk edited files from HR, or have to go out and fill in these huge spreadsheets and then import them into AD to get that to work. And this typically means that, you know, the profiles don't get updated. They're often out of date as soon as they get pushed in via IT pros or via HR. And it means that if you're trying to use that information inside of your business applications, that often you're going to be making business decisions that are inaccurate because that profile information isn't correct. And so what we do is actually run a service inside of Azure that leverages the AI technology that's available and the bot technology that's available to ensure that consistency and compliance across all of Office 365. And so the main thing we tell to people is that we kind of move them from kind of blank contact cards to these really populated content cards. And as developers, what that means is you've got rich profile information that you can use to build your business applications inside of Office 365. And the way we do that is we essentially analyze either Active Directory on premises, or we analyze Azure Active Directory, and we identify what's missing and then also what's incorrect in our premium product, that is. And essentially, we will email with personalized messages or notify them on Skype for Business and Teams, essentially whether they are missing or they have incorrect information inside their profile, with a link to a profile update page. And then essentially that page can be accessed either by a browser on a desktop or a browser on their mobile. And we do use magic links, much like if you're familiar with Slack and some other SaaS services out there, so that you don't actually have to authenticate as long as you click on the link within a certain time period. And it really streamlines that sign up process. So if I just jump over to my browser here and put on my Justin demo hat, essentially what you'll see is his OWA experience, where he's got an email. It's been personalized. He's in the marketing department, and this particular company has put in specific banners to kind of see that it's an official message from the internet internal team. And it's highlighted here that there's a bunch of attributes that are missing. And so when they click on update my profile and they click on that magic link, If I was in my mobile browser, this would be the same kind of experience. It's going to load that profile for them and then allow them to start updating their profile information. Now, immediately we can see here is I have the ability to see how complete my profile is by this banner, very similar to what you see when you're on LinkedIn and Facebook, where they're trying to gamify, encouraging you to update it. And now I have the ability to come in here and update photos. Now, the nice thing here when I'm updating my photos is that if, for instance, I try and use a photo with too many faces in it as an example, we actually validate that using the cognitive services available in Azure, and we flag that there are too many faces in that photo. We can also do things like make sure people aren't uploading pictures of dogs and cats, or maybe cartoons, or we have a customer that is in education in Australia where unfortunately their students who are used to kind of posting profile photos on Facebook don't really get kind of the understanding they probably shouldn't be posting photos themselves in swimsuits on their corporate environment or even their school environment. And so they flag those types of things. Now, we make it super easy to come in and edit this type of information and even have some kind of validators there on phone numbers and so forth. But then some of them really things I think are key to point out from a developer perspective here is that where I mentioned before about things like job title, we provide drop-down lists to allow you to enforce consistency of what the job titles are. So for instance, if I was inside of my department, I would know that my information technology department was always information technology. So if I was doing any kind of matching in the background in my code for a particular department name, I have the ability to guarantee that. Where our product really kind of hums is if that person has updated their department to maybe IT or I.T. or infotech, because we know there's a default list of appropriate departments here, we'll actually reach out to that user and say, hey, your job title is incorrect. You need to come and pick the correct department, the correct job title. And so this really does help with the consistency, and therefore from your business logic in your applications, you can start to make kind of a lot more kind of confident decisions on how or what you're going to show in your user interface based on the profile information that is there for the individual, but also for the team of people that may be using that application. Now, just to show on a back-end aspect here, what we actually do from an IT admin perspective, as a developer, maybe you're interested in what this might look like. And I'm just going to wave my magic wand to show you a better demo environment here. But the intent here is to show that we can highlight how many attributes are missing and how that's improved over time by using our product. And even be as granular to say that, hey, look, we know that there's 77% of the users in the environment have got management reports, but there's still a bunch missing. But also that over time, since the beginning of 2007, we've seen a constant improvement as more and more users have updated their manager field inside of the system. And from an HR perspective, often we'll get the, well, you know, we don't really want users being able to update all their profile information, like we still want to be eyeballing this before it happens. Essentially what we can actually do is provide an approval process for HR to kind of either reject those changes or approve those changes over time if they want to have certain checks. And we can even get as granular as deciding on which things get approved and which ones just automatically get pushed through. And then one other really relevant thing which I find a lot of developers are interested in as they start extending this is we provide an out-of-the-box list of attributes that are supported, which are coming from Active Directory and also from Office 365 profiles in SharePoint user profiles and Exchange user profiles. But you can add your own. So for instance, if you wanted the ability to have a preference maybe that was used across all your business applications that you wanted to create inside the profile, you could do that here and add it. And you know, in some cases, what we found with customers is they'll use existing attributes that exist that aren't being used already. And that could be some kind of language preference. Now, there is actually a language preference in SharePoint user profiles, which is hidden and not shown on any forms that you could start to use. And you could choose to have a particular drop down of languages, which I don't have in here, as a preference there, and we can make that required and turn on the hyperbot, which means that if anyone is missing a value in that particular attribute, the Hyperfish product will reach out to them and say, hey, you need to go fill in your language preference, click here, and they go to the form and they'll pick it from the picker. And so this allows you to make sure that you have that information available to you if you're trying to roll out a business application that requires that type of profile information inside there. So I'd highly encourage you to check out hyperfish.com to try the Hyperfish Lite product, which essentially gives you this product for free with the profile updates, but purely for the profile photos. So you can actually see this product working. So Matthias, I know we talked about this in the past, but how do you find people are securing this information inside of their business applications from an Office 365 perspective? What types of things can Rencore help with to kind of eliminate some of those concerns about who accesses what?
So, of course, a lot of organizations think of Office 365 as a service that is already secure by default, and that's true. There is, by default, of course, a security layer that Microsoft provides, and they have additional services like threat protection, data loss prevention, and cloud app security, and so on, which is helping you to manage basically the data that is accessed and securing that data. And this is all good and great. But as soon as you start doing customizations, as I mentioned before, then you're suddenly on your own. Microsoft cannot, they are just not able to check all the customizations that an organization is going to build themselves. But on the other hand, Microsoft wants to encourage the organizations to customize, because the customization help the organization to adopt SharePoint and to really get the most out of it for the business and improve the work together that they have. So customizations by themselves are a really good thing. The challenge is just how do you work with them, and how do you make sure that they're not causing any problems. So I'll just take over again with a presentation. A moment. So you should be able to see that again. So as I mentioned, customizations are good and they improve your business. So I think it's the wrong way to say we are basically avoiding customizations entirely, because at the end you're limiting yourself in improving your business. So then it comes down to how can we keep this profile information and also all the other data in SharePoint secure. And for that, our product comes into place, which is currently in preview, and it's called Analysis Cloud. So Analysis Cloud is a customization governance solution. So it's not governing the access to data itself, it's governing the customizations that are deployed on your environment, or the customizations that are done by the end users who are using SharePoint as a service or Office 365 as a service. So Analysis Cloud allows you to permanently analyze and monitor your Office 365 tenant for those customizations. So it's a little bit similar like Hyperfish. It's also running on Azure, and it's connecting also to your Office 365 tenant. But it's not scanning the user profiles, the Azure Active Directory. It's scanning the SharePoint Online sites permanently on a schedule and checking what is going on there. It discovers these kind of customizations, and if they haven't been there before, allows you to create an inventory to identify if they are desired or unknown, or if they are harmful. It actually analyzes the code, if there is code there, and prevents these kind of security leaks that I just showed you in that demo presentation. Further, we of course also give guidance. Okay, this customization, what does it do? It maybe has no intention to be harmful, but it's just not declared in the right way to the IT organization what it actually is doing. Maybe it's requesting too many permissions that it actually doesn't need. Developers are lazy, so developers always say, okay, give me all permissions that you have that I can do my job, but maybe they don't need it. So maybe, as you just mentioned before, Jeremy, you're asking for read-only permissions to that user profile information with Hyperfish, but maybe other customizations done by your own developers are asking for full control or full access to all data and also write permissions, despite not being necessary. So it helps you to govern those customizations and also enforce your individual policies for your organization, and therefore also, of course, maintain the performance of those customizations that impact your end users. And at the end, if you're an administrator and need to support that environment and you provide an SLA, a service level agreement towards the business to have Office 365 running and available, it helps you also to reduce support. First of all, that know what customizations are there and can prepare for them. But on the other hand, also, for example, to differentiate what kind of support you provide for the different departments or the different site owners. So maybe an uncustomized site, you have an SLA that you are available within an hour and help them to fix any problems they have or give them support. But if the business department decided to customize it to their needs, you might provide a different response time, or they might even have to pay internally more to your support organization to get that same kind of support. And last but not least, it helps you also with the adoption of new workloads that Microsoft is constantly pushing out on Office 365. These customizations can be a major blocker for adopting those things. If you just imagine in Office 365, we have this modern experience. So we are moving away from the legacy classic SharePoint site to the modern experience, modern lists, and all those things. So if you have built customizations on top of the classic site, these customizations would be lost maybe in the modern experience. So suddenly your end users will not be able to work there anymore. So identifying the customizations, identifying also what those customizations are doing, and if they block you for adopting these kind of modern experiences, that is something that Analysis Cloud can help you with. So as I mentioned, Analysis Cloud is currently in preview, and you can sign up for the preview. I'll just give you a couple of screenshots that you can understand a little bit how it looks like and what it does. So it's basically a service that runs also in the cloud, connects to Office 365. And what you see at the moment, that's the overview dashboard. So here you see everything that has been found in the tenant that has been analyzed. So how many users have access, the sites, the webs, the lists, the files that are on that site. And it gives you a overview about different angles of those customizations. So in regards of security, in regards of usability or upgradability, and if those customizations that are there follow best practices. So if you do not have any customizations, all those numbers would be 100%. You have a brilliant score there. We also give you updates what Microsoft is maybe changing in Office 365. Some of you might recall about a couple of months ago, Microsoft deprecated calculated columns or HTML in calculated columns. And they basically announced that from one day to another, and it's going to go away in the next 2 weeks or something like that. So when such an announcement comes out, we can show you with Analysis Cloud immediately, okay, this kind of customization is used in following places, and you can reach out to the end users. Okay, do you really use that anymore? Can you maybe get rid of that because we are losing support from Microsoft for this kind of customization? So looking a step deeper into the product. So if you choose a specific section, in this case, upgradability, you see the different violations that have been found for this area. So in this case, for example, if you look at the first policy violation, you have a site collection which has a user custom action registered in an unsupported location. So you can define also, for example, locations where code is stored that are marked as secure or whitelisted. And if anything is stored somewhere else, basically out of your control, you get that highlighted. So you get details about that. You learn about that violation itself. How severe is it for you as your business? So not necessarily every violation is a security problem and needs to be acted upon right away. And based on that violation, you can decide if you, for example, want to ignore it. Maybe it's not relevant for you, so it will not pop up anymore in the future. But you can also create tasks out of that in order to solve that violation. And we track automatically the task. So when that violation in the next analysis run is removed, then the task will be automatically closed for you. So we help you to manage the process of resolving the issues that have been discovered with Analysis Cloud. I mentioned before support limitations, so we can show you which of the sites are supported. You can also check individual sites. You can dig in deeper what is actually causing an unsupported stage. You can define also your own support limitations or service levels in order to match that exactly to your business. And it goes that far into the customization itself that we are actually analyzing the code that is deployed. So if it's an actual coded customization, we show you, and we also keep track of that code. So if that code is changed, maybe by your third-party vendor where you bought an application from the store, we can track what the code, how the code is changing, which lines have been removed, which APIs are used within the code, and give you an overview and highlight issues that arise by these changes that are made with those customizations. So just to sum them up, Analysis Cloud basically helps you to enforce governance and risk prevention for those customizations in SharePoint. It's not preventing customizations, it's just helping you to monitor them, which you would be not able to do manually. It's just impossible, especially if you allow your end users actually to use SharePoint as it is intended to be used, to adjust it to their specific needs to solve their business problems. So it helps you to discover all those customizations live, analyzes those customizations for those potential threats, and helps you to continuously track and monitor them. So as I mentioned, it's currently in preview. You can sign up for the preview, and my colleague Tobias, also an MVP and the product owner for Analysis Cloud, he will personally onboard you actually to see how those things work. We are planning to have public release of Analysis Cloud at beginning of next year, but nevertheless, you can already sign up now for the preview and will get either onboarded or informed as soon as it is available. So that's about it for customization governance. We have a couple of questions and answers. So Jeremy, you can unmute yourself again.
Yeah, I saw there was one here. It was, what about the user profile service application? Can it be optimized, configured better to achieve better profile results? I'm literally, which is on the whiteboard behind me, writing a white paper specifically on this. Where there's some things that you can do in the enterprise search, both in SharePoint Server and SharePoint Online, to optimize how the search capabilities work inside of user profile service in the enterprise search experience and also in the API experience as well. There's a bunch of things that aren't on by default on things like last name phonetics and some optimizations on indexing that will make the searches quicker as a developer when you're pulling those things through. So that's definitely worth kind of handling that from that perspective. So yeah, so there's some things you can do there. And then Rohit, I see that you said, how is the user information from SharePoint stored in user profile different than what's in Delve? Which one should be trusted? I have seen scenarios where user profiles shows user job title different in Delve than in SharePoint user information list. Yeah, it's a good question. So there's actually 3 places there, which is a bit confusing. And I'll add another complexity, which is Azure AD. When you sign up for Office 365, or if you're an on-premises SharePoint server, you either have Active Directory or you'll have Azure Active Directory. Essentially from there, what it's doing is a synchronization up into Azure Active Directory if you're in a hybrid scenario. And then there's a time delay to then pull out of Azure Active Directory into the SharePoint user profile service on premises or online. That SharePoint user profile service is essentially a database with everyone's user credentials with a GUID that maps back all the way to AD. But it has additional properties in it like skills, projects, education, birthdays. There's a bunch of things in there that don't exist in AD that only exist in SharePoint user profiles. It's a lot easier to create brand new properties there than it is to create them in AD, primarily because we find from our research that AD people don't like adding extra attributes into AD because it extends the schema and causes all sorts of historical problems that they've not really overcome on a personal level, to be quite honest. And so that SharePoint user profile service with all those additional properties is something that is surfaced across Office 365 now. The only exception to that is profile photo, which is actually sourced now from Exchange profiles. Now, to answer your question specifically, Delve as a service inside of Office 365 does actually indeed use the Exchange profile photo, but all of the properties of service in Delve come from the user profile service or user profile properties. And you can get at that if you go into the admin console of Office 365, go to the SharePoint admin center and go to user profiles. That's where all that information in Delve is surfaced from. Now, the SharePoint user information list is something that's kind of a hang-on from the old SharePoint days, where each site collection has this hidden list that you can access via the APIs. And that is doing a synchronization as well. And there is one SharePoint timer job that keeps those user information lists in sync with the SharePoint user profile properties. And unfortunately, that SharePoint job timer can, on premises, either be stopped or it can be delayed or there can be errors, which will mean they won't stay in sync. I haven't witnessed this in a customer yet with SharePoint Online, but my only recommendation is if you're doing anything with user information and you're in Office 365 as a developer, and it's something that we learned as we were working at the best approaches to update and read information, is that you should really be using the Microsoft Graph as a kind of a first leap with user information. But also what you should be doing, if you can't get it out of the Microsoft Graph for whatever reason, using the user profile service information, not the user information lists that are specific to each site collection. It's a bit of a catch that you want to just make sure you're aware of. And I think there's a question there for you as well, Matthias.
Yeah, there is a question from Aaron. Is it certain that Microsoft will not support any customizations in the modern experience? For example, I use a drop-down, I assume. I used to drop a JavaScript on the classic document libraries for the cascaded columns, but it's not possible with the modern experience. So no, it's not certain. Microsoft is actually opening up SharePoint, also modern sites, for further customization. So the new customization model called the SharePoint framework was initially just providing like these client parts or web part components, and now we have as well also the SharePoint framework extensions, which allow you also to customize, for example, list views and create things that we previously did with JSLink, for example, formatting of list columns or showing additional data there. And you can also, for example, add new commands that like ribbon actions that we had before, or even entire application customizers. So maybe that's how you can call it, where you inject script into a page. So Microsoft is adding capabilities for customization also in modern sites, and that whole problem that I showed in that little video is basically there no matter where you are, if you're in classic or if you're modern. It doesn't matter if it's an add-in or if it's an SharePoint framework component, or if it's a content editor web part that embeds script that is stored in some library. It doesn't really matter. As soon as you customize with code, then you can mess things up, and as long as the people know what they are doing, then that's no problem. But you will not have the control of everyone in your organization and be sure that everybody knows what they're doing. I know that from myself. In my early consulting days, when I started doing SharePoint, had not much clue about SharePoint, but was going to customers sold as a SharePoint developer, developing SharePoint for maybe half a year or so. Well, this is how it is in consulting. I did really bad stuff myself, and I just did it because the customer asked for it and wanted me to get the job done. And the customer in that case was the business. So the business told me, okay, can you do this? Can you do that? Add something into the page. So I pulled up my sleeves, did some JavaScript hacks, modified the DOM tree, moved stuff around, used the web services at that time, SharePoint 2007, 2010, and so on, to access data without anyone in the IT knowing what is actually going on. I knew my way around. I read some blogs. I read Jeremy's blog, right? Jeremy, you did some funny things there as well on your blog. So
lots of funny things.
And that hasn't changed. At the end, the business will ask for customizations, and if you do not lock it down entirely, there will be a way to customize it. Somebody will find a way to customize it to their needs. And Microsoft is actually making it easier, and it's getting even more complex if you look into then new workloads like Flow and Power Apps. These are also customizations that access the data, that connect services, maybe external services, with your SharePoint and transfer data from one service to another. So, yeah, to answer your question, no, this is not going away with modern sites. The same issue will be there forever as long as customizations in general are allowed.
Yeah, there's another one here. When you add a custom attribute in Hyperfish, does the attribute get created in user profiles and or Azure AD? The answer is no. The reason we decided against that was typically that's a different person that owns user profiles or owns AD. And so the idea was you'd go and get them to create it. But if you notice when I did a demo, as you type the name of the attribute, it kind of auto completes the name, and because we're looking for those properties when they're connected up to it. And then the other question was, does it support mapping user profile property with a managed metadata term set? A good question. Right now, we support you providing a list of values in a drop-down list. It is on our backlog to add managed metadata support. What we've interestingly found is that there seems to be a pattern of people moving away from managed metadata because that UI has had no updates since SharePoint 2010. And so for us, it seems like a bit of a waste at the minute to kind of handle kind of investing some time in our products on that until we see Microsoft spend a little bit more time and invest a little bit more time on managed metadata in that way. And as a developer, I'm sure you understand that you have to pick your priorities well. Where do custom attributes get displayed? The custom attributes can be reordered on a profile page wherever you like. So when I go to my profile form in Hyperfish, those attributes can show up next to the job title, next to the department. Then on a separate thing, you can change the orders, change the groupings, however you choose. So that just treats it as another attribute to be monitored, much like the way that we support not just custom attributes from AD or SharePoint user profiles, but for instance, we can connect to Workday or SAP or PeopleSoft and also do validation of those types of properties as well. If you did create a custom property, I can see where your question is going now, and you wanted it to show, there are some things you can switch on to have them show up in a Delve profile. Unfortunately, they will not show up in contact cards in Outlook, or they won't show up in the new Pro property panes on the right-hand side in OneDrive, SharePoint, and Outlook Web Access. Microsoft has said that they are considering adding the ability for you to choose which attribute shows in those contact cards, but they've not given a definitive answer on whether they've started work on that and when it will be available. So we're pushing pretty hard on that, and there are user voices out there that I can tweet about later, just so you can go vote them up if you think that's important to you. I think that's all the questions, Matthias.
Yeah, I think that's all the questions. So just to wrap that up. So first of all, thank you very much, Jeremy, for joining me today and telling us a little bit more about Hyperfish. I think that's a really, really interesting solution that you guys have built there, and I believe you will have quite a lot of interest in that already. You launched, I think, over a year ago at Ignite last year.
Yeah, that's right. In 18 months ago nearly now, yeah. All right,
so things are going well. That looks really, really great from what I've seen in the preview 1.5 years ago that you had. You have come a really great way, really impressive. for anyone who is interested what we're up to next, so in January, after a little bit longer break of our monthly webinars, we'll have another webinar about GDPR, the new data privacy regulation that is going to be introduced in May, or I think 25th of May next year, and basically for every business that is doing business with an organization in the EU, they have to comply with the new data privacy regulation. So that also affects you guys, Jeremy, right?
It affects absolutely everybody. I can see that Nikki's photo is very serious there. So I think
that's a reason for that.
An important webinar to attend.
Yeah, so we had already a webinar which you can look up in our recordings about GDPR with Paolo Pialosi, more from a technology perspective, what kind of tools also within the Office 365 service can help you to comply with the GDPR. This webinar with Nikki Burrell, also Microsoft MVP from Germany, who is very much focusing on these legal aspects of running cloud services for Microsoft. He is talking about the myths that are around it. Everybody's talking about GDPR basically, but nobody has a clue what it actually means. So he will do some myth busting of GDPR in the context of Office 365. So I can really recommend you to join that webinar next year. And you can find the sign-up page on our website, rencore.com, like the one you filled in when you signed up for this webinar. All right, Jeremy, thank you very much.
No, you're welcome, mate. Happy holidays to everybody. Hopefully everyone gets a nice time to decompress and wear really odd sweaters like Matthias is on right now.
That's the best one, right? We had an ugly sweater contest this morning in our team meeting, so that's why I have this one on.
You should post on Twitter all the other options. I have seen worse, but that is a pretty good one.
It's a nice one, right? my kids loved it.
I bet they do. And if anyone's got any spare time over the holidays, it gives me a good opportunity to plug. I do a weekly podcast. It's available on iTunes and Google Play. You should definitely check out the Hyperfish podcast. If you're lonely and you're missing that Office 365 news and you like the sweet tones of my voice, then you should definitely download the podcast as well.
Yes, I can totally recommend that one as well. We have our own podcast as well, Rencore podcast, but Tobias hasn't been able to do interviews in the recent couple of months because he got a baby and is somehow occupied in his free time with other things. I cannot understand that. Can you relate to that, Jeremy?
I can. His kid's a little bit younger than mine. Mine's 6 months now, but yeah, I can definitely relate.
Yeah, I think Tobias is still in panic mode, so he's... But we will resume the podcast next year again, and then we'll compete with you about the news, all about Office 365. All right. Thank you very much. And talk to you soon. Happy holidays.
Cheers, guys.
Bye.